Have you ever been the new kid at school? If not, imagine this. You wake up early, you put on your cutest first day of school clothes, you sign in at the principal's office, you wave a shaky hand goodbye to your parent, you walk down the quiet hallway because everyone else is already in class, you stop at this one particular big brown door, it opens, you walk in and you're introduced to your new teacher. She greets you with a big warm smile, and then she faces the class and says, "Class, we have a new student." This was my reality in third grade at Dunbar Elementary School. And I remember being nervous, but also excited to start a new school, walking into that classroom and seeing all these new faces, some of them with looks of curiosity and surprise, others with looks of excitement. And then there's me, looking back at them with what I'm sure was a similar expression on my face. But I'm also searching for that one friendly and welcoming face in the crowd. And then I see it. I see her. And thankfully, I'm seated right next to her. And this begins the start of what I didn't know would be a long-term friendship. Me and this friend, we go through so many of our life firsts together. Our first crushes, our first bad grades, our first fights, our first dances, our first training brawls, our first boyfriends, our first everything. But then we go through a first I never saw coming. A first that made me rethink a lot of things. A first that made me question if it was time to move on. Hi, everyone. My name is Melody, and I want to welcome you to the F.A.I.L.Podcast, where I share my own personal stories of how I have learned to not only accept and embrace my life fails, but also how I have grown because of them. I am so glad you're joining me today, and I hope you're doing well. And I really hope you got a chance to listen to my last episode, episode 5, titled, "Are You Ready to Set Your Boundaries?" Because for today, I would like to piggyback off that discussion just a little bit in regards to not only setting boundaries in our relationships, but also using those boundaries to help you decide when it's time to move on. I know for me, and probably a lot of people, when you're young and you start making friends and you get that one special person that becomes your best friend, your BFF, there's not many, if any, boundaries that you have. It's simple. You like them and they like you. You hang out and play together. You share each other's secrets. You fight, you make up. And it becomes a rinse and repeat cycle of this same dynamic for many years. But throughout those years, 2 different lives are being led in 2 separate households with 2 very different experiences being had outside of the friendship. And although you catch glimpses of things that don't align with your day-to-day experience, it doesn't make you pull away or question the relationship. You just observe, take mental notes, and continue on with the friendship. This was my experience with my best friend who I met in the 3rd grade. It was great having this little cute ball of energy and spunk choosing me to be her friend in this brand new school. And she was also very protective over me. So much so that anyone who tried to mess with me, she would bravely and loudly tell them that if they wanted to fight me, they would have to fight her first. So not only did we share this connection, but I felt safe with her. Throughout the rest of elementary and middle school, we shared most of the same classes. But once we got to high school, she ended up transferring to a different school across town during our 10th grade year. That move, I think, started a noticeable shift in our relationship. There was a distance I felt that wasn't huge physically or mentally, but it was still an absence of us being connected and integrated into each other's lives like we once were. And also, as two teenage girls, we both were changing and developing into our own independent selves. But still, she was my friend, my BFF, and I wanted to hold on to that comfort and connection and safety I had with her since third grade. In an attempt to strengthen our bond, I briefly followed her over to her new high school for part of the school year in my 11th grade year. But it wasn't the same. Something was different. Something had changed. And during one of our outings together, I saw what changed when I witnessed her for the first time stealing out of a convenience store. And I remember how shocked I was to see how easily and calmly she did it without the store clerk, who, by the way, was standing right across from us, not see it. But I wasn't totally surprised by her action, because I knew from her history that she had been exposed to that type of activity throughout her life. So I didn't judge. And yes, I knew what she did was wrong. But no, I didn't feel the need to stop being her friend because of that. At the time, to me, the situation was two separate, unrelated things. One, this was my best friend who I knew and loved. And two, stealing was something she chose to do in her life. The latter I thought had nothing to do with me or our friendship. The fail on my part was not realizing that the moment she chose to steal in my presence, it had everything to do with me. I never imagined what she chose to do would ever affect me or my life. I never could have imagined that another first we would experience together would be us getting detained together. It started off one regular afternoon with us hanging out at her home. Her mom walks in and says she needed some stuff from the store. And so I naturally offered to take her, my friend, to the store in my car. Albertsons was right down the street, so we get there. And while she's doing her shopping, I'm over at the book section looking through magazines waiting for her. Now, I literally had just watched her mom give her money to buy these items. So the thought of her stealing never even crossed my mind. So cut to her checking out and us walking through the automatic sliding glass doors. I hear a rush of people coming from behind us. It's about 4 or 5 people from the store, and they circle us. They look at my friend, and one of them says something to the effect, "Stop right there. I saw you stealing. Take out right now what you took." And all I could do was freeze and look at her too, because I knew they were probably telling the truth because I had seen her steal before. I just didn't think she would be stealing on that particular day. And to my surprise, they not only took her to the store's loss prevention office, they took me as well and labeled me as her accomplice. The store clerk who saw her stealing stated he didn't see me take anything, but he was positive I was her lookout person. The whole situation to me was unreal, and I felt so embarrassed, powerless, and mad at my friend for putting me in that predicament. And I was mad at these store people for accusing me of doing something I hadn't done. And I was mad at myself for unknowingly putting myself in the situation. But more importantly, I was terrified. The voice in my head screamed, "You're going to jail and your reputation and future is ruined." But by the grace of God, thankfully, once the police arrived and spoke to all parties involved, they decided to let me go because, in their words, "You're only 17, otherwise you would be going to jail with her." Looking back on it now, I'm not even sure how true that statement was, but it left a lasting impact on me. I walked out of that store a free 17-year-old, but I felt guilty. I felt guilty about having to leave my best friend while she was being handcuffed in the middle of the store. I felt guilty having to go back to her house with the stuff she had paid for and telling her mom what happened and seeing the hurt look on her face. I felt guilty going home and telling my mom what happened, but purposely leaving out the fact that this wasn't the first time I knew she stole things. And I felt guilty that I had never set that boundary with my friend and told her to never steal around me, otherwise we could no longer be friends. Because I failed to do that, it almost cost me my freedom. But like I've said before, your fails teach you lessons, and this one taught me a big one. To be careful about who you decide to have in your life and to watch their actions. And if anything they do doesn't feel right in your spirit, remove yourself from the situation, the relationship, or both completely. That day in Albertsons not only ended with us being detained together, but it also was the beginning of me questioning the future of our friendship. Once my friend was released from jail, we tried to hang out and reconnect, and of course she apologized. But our connection, which was already shaky, was broken, and the safety I once felt within our friendship was gone. I had to make a decision. And although I don't regret a moment of our friendship, I also have never regretted making the decision to move on from it either. So listeners, I'll ask you, what relationship have you had to move on from? Everyone, thank you so much for listening to the F.A.I.L. podcast today. Before you go, please drop down in the comments section and leave a rating and a review. Next episode will drop Monday, October 12th. Please follow, like, share, and subscribe to the show. Once again, I'm your host, Melody, and I will catch up with you next time.